This week we will be covering AVI-SPL's new office in India, Zoom's privacy settlement, and more. Coming up next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This week on AV Week, episode 559, recorded Friday, May 6, 2022, Speechless.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Crestron.
Welcome to another great episode of AV Week. I'm your host, Bradford Ben, and I am not Tim Albright, and neither are you. He is currently winging his way to Spain to cover ISE for AVNation, so you're definitely going to want to stay tuned to us to hear more about that coverage. Instead, in a first ever occurrence, I am the host of AV Week this week, so that means I actually have to listen to our esteemed guests. First, I'd like to introduce my friend Alicia Henley, who is coming to us from Tampa, a mere hour and a half away from me. Alicia, how you doing?
I'm good. What's happening, Bradford? Thanks for having me. It's always fun hanging out.
My pleasure to have you here. And then our other guest, which I'll pretend to pay attention to, is north of the border and exiled from the States by my own personal edict. It is Matt D. Scott, who also hosts Rosie Week right here on AVNation. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Bradford, for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Actually, it's Tim's pleasure. But,
it is.
It's my pleasure to pretend I'm Tim. This is weird. I actually have to...
Do you want to pretend you're Tim?
No, but I'll do it anyway. It's the polite thing to do.
Oh, our poor listeners today.
This is going to be the best show ever. We have all sorts of good stuff. We're going to start with a little bit of international business. This news comes to us from our friends over at AV Network. AVI-SPL has incorporated in India, which obviously is a big change. It allows them to have local resources as well as other changes such as making it easier to do business in the country. So I'm going to start with you, Alicia, because you actually do work for a foreign-owned entity now that you're working for Dante, which is Audinate out of Australia. So you actually can kind of understand this. I hope it's either that or I gave you a great intro with nothing. But I wanted to get your take on this move for them to incorporate as a private company in India.
I mean, I think it's a great move, but I didn't really look at this announcement from a traditional business side. I looked at it as more of a pipeline for more diversity and, basically being able to approach the market more from a global perspective, which they've already done for years, but just adding building blocks to that. And that within itself is exciting. And a woman is their regional director. So that alone excited me. But from a business standpoint, I mean, I don't think they can do any wrong by making this move. And that's just my personal opinion.
Okay. So I understand the diversity, and I'm with you. I applaud that they have a woman at the helm. But Matt, what other things do you think this brings to the table with AVI expanding in such a way?
Well, usually the biggest thing with these kind of moves is it's one thing to work in a country. It's another thing to have an office in the country, which I believe they've had for a handful of years now. But once you incorporate and you become a legal entity within that country, it opens up a lot more opportunities and is just a much easier play when you get into dealing with governments or anything else, because you're not just a global company with a local office. You're now incorporated in that country. You're following all of the legal ramifications of being a business within that country. It's the same as going state to state and expanding, but fully expanding into that state, opposed to just flying in some resources to complete a project or subbing out some work under your flag. When you're on the ground, when you're again fully incorporated, running that way, it's that next evolution in doing a lot more work within that area.
And
And there's tax breaks and all the other really good, fun things that come with that.
I'm going to kind of put on my question hat here because, I haven't technically been in the business as long as you in Bradford, but do you think I think this was a smart move because ultimately it's easier to do business, as you said, but is it easier for the end users and like the end users of the end users to do business as well? Because that's what we want, right? We want to be easy to do business with. And did this move do that for AVI-SPL?
I would argue it does. They're a big enough brand that I don't think there were too many, potential customers who were like, well, you're not incorporated. You're not an official business in India, so we're not going to work with you. But it does add more credibility. It adds it's an easier path, right?
Got it.
You're not running the risk of running into some weird tax thing or a variety of little local legislative issues that sometimes can pop up if you're not incorporated in the region that you're working. When I started my company and we had a legal business in the U.S. as well as in Canada, that was so incredibly easier to do business in the U.S. because we were incorporated there. When we were doing it previously without it, you could do it, but there were hiccups that you'd run into.
Right.
When you're fully invested in that from a legal and a procedural standpoint, it makes it easy for everyone involved.
But to kind of follow up a little bit more on Alicia's question, because now she's taking over, which is a nice change. It is a better thing for the local people in country, in India itself. And it's the same thing if you have an office in South America or an office in Europe. You're, as an American-based company, calling from India to get tech support or have someone who speaks the language or understands the culture is much more difficult than if you have an office there. It's one of the reasons a lot of places are opening offices in the areas they're servicing. India has multiple languages and multiple dialects. Making communication can sometimes be the hardest thing. And it's not just India. It's China. It's Spain. It's Germany. Take your pick of any place that doesn't speak English as their primary language. And this becomes a big thing. Then you add in time zone differences. Here in the States, we already know the problems of dealing with East Coast versus West Coast, of if you don't order something early enough on the East Coast from a West Coast office, it's not going to get shipped out to you, or vice versa. I've had a lot of customers who are on the West Coast who would call me at noon and go, I need this shipped out. Well, sorry, noon their time, which is 3 o'clock when I was in the East Coast, and it doesn't help them. So I think this move, to your point, Alicia, to your question, is definitely a move in the right direction of being able to be more responsive to the customers and to the customers' needs.
I love the way you put that, talking about culture.
Do you think this helps them locally with talent as well? Do you think that factors in, that being, again, fully incorporated in that country makes it easier to navigate the hiring process? Or does that play in at all?
Going back to Bradford's point, I mean, if you owning that space, you understand the culture, and knowing and understanding the culture is half of a sales process. Talking to people, getting to know people, and building those relationships. So if your techs, going into homes or going into enterprise businesses, know the culture, I think that's automatically a win in my book. But does it help right away? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how they do the pull in new people into their business.
And from a business standpoint, it is better to have a legal representation in the country that you're hiring in. It's just plain easier for all sorts of reasons. But the biggest one is you can pay in their dollars or in their currency, in their country, not have to worry about exchange rate and meet all of the requirements. It just makes it much easier, which is why many international companies have international offices for that exact reason.
Interesting perspectives.
It's all about the dollars. So I want to move on to the next thing while Matt continues to throw various hand signals. The next story, speaking of dollars, we're going to jump over to Zoom that is paying out an $85 million lawsuit to settle some security issues. The question that Tim has, and I agree with, is do we think this is going to make any of us safer and change any of Zoom's practices in the long run? So, Matt, I'm going to start with you. What do you think? Is this a big move? Is this actually going to have an impact, or you think it's just a slap on the wrist?
From a legal standpoint or from a fiscal standpoint?
From a is it going to impact us as Zoom users? Doesn't do anything for us besides possibly raise rates.
I don't think it's really going to raise rates. 85 mil, which is a huge amount to myself and Bradford. I know to Alicia it's nothing, but for us commoners, it's huge. To Zoom, it's not a big deal, and I would be shocked if this does not play out down the road in an appeal court, if they appeal this decision to some degree, or at least try to whittle that down a little bit. That being said, I think it already affected Zoom in the manner in which they go to business and the way that they deal with their security practices. As soon as Zoom bombing became a big thing, they did start to crack down. They introduced the waiting room. That might have been a feature, but it was definitely not a touted feature. They've done a lot of stuff to try and increase their security while maintaining the ease of use. The legal case, I would have been very interested to see where this would have gone if it was tried outside of the U.S. The U.S. is so litigious that this didn't shock me at all. I would have been surprised to see, or really interested to see how this would have played out if it was tried in like an EU court, for example. As Bradford's laughing.
I'm going to laugh, and I'm going to wait for others to comment before I comment.
I do think that it will help hopefully bring to front of mind for all of these manufacturers that play online that you do need to take a stronger approach to your security and to your privacy. Because in the past, when something would come up and there'd be a security or a privacy issue, very rarely was there a massive legal and monetary issue that would come out of it, outside of the generic, we lost business because, our security practices sucked. This is showing that if you are lax and you are found to be lax, if someone brings a case, you can get penalized fairly aggressively. And hopefully this will usher in a better level, a higher level of security coming from companies like Zoom, and heck, all of our AV manufacturers that, in my humble opinion, do not do enough to ensure security of their products that they're putting on or asking us as integrators to throw on customers' networks.
So I'm going to ask Alicia a qualifying question, and now you'll see why I laughed at Matt.
Oh boy, don't even start. I don't know why you were laughing at Matt. So don't even get
That's a normal reaction from him when I talk, so it's fine.
So Alicia, how do you see this as impacting the industry as a whole with their security and privacy issues?
If nothing else, it should be a wake-up call. And just on the panel last week in Chicago, we were talking about this, how everybody's trying to keep their AV stuff, separate. But there's a lot of situations where we're going into converged networks and everything has to be secure. The enterprise, they are demanding us to, put certain things in place before they will even buy. And that's the way it's going. Security is top of mind for not only, I believe, consumers, but it has to be top of mind for us that are installing and selling these type of solutions, because red flag people. If you're not awake right now, seeing what's happening with Zoom, don't think it can't happen to you, because more people are realizing what AV actually is because of Zoom. right? The average person had no idea what AV was. And then all of a sudden, I'm out walking my dogs with a Zoom shirt on. I've got my neighbors stopping, oh my God, you work at Zoom? I'm like, no, I don't. But they have an idea of what our industry actually is now. And if we don't put the proper security measures in place with our solutions, then a lot of us are going to be in that same situation.
And I agree with you both. The only thing is, because I'm that nerd and Josh Schrago, all hail Josh Schrago, this is also as much about the privacy as the end-to-end encryption. They were sharing user data with Facebook and LinkedIn and other places, and that's as much of the lawsuit as the end-to-end encryption, which is why I was laughing at your comment, Matt, of let them try this in the EU. The EU is probably going to be up next because this violates all of the EU privacy and those components of all their data privacy acts. So it's as much about the lack of end-to-end security and the lack of due diligence as it is the privacy policy that we all had to sign to use it didn't actually get followed by the company. And
I'm
someone
shocked.
holding that. It's a bigger issue than you think, but it is shocking. And I think that's the bigger wake-up call of yes, the metadata is proprietary and you can't change your mind without telling people that you're sharing their data. Because as a business, to Alicia's point of how security is important, if you knew that I was talking with, say, AVWeek, and you worked, and then I was talking with Launch, and then I was talking with AV Network, and you could put all those dots together, you might be able to come up with what I'm doing and talking about. And that's where the metadata became just as important as the actual conversation. I think that's the other takeaway beyond to Alicia's point, keep everything secure.
I would love to see a point where these companies are forced to show their hand a little bit better, right? I know I'm not the only one who reads most privacy policies and most of the terms and conditions that you have to sign for every app you use and every device you use, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the interconnectedness of those policies and how they work with other vendors is really disconcerting. And it would be nice if they could find a way to obviously have the legalese, but take some initiative and do hey, when you log in here, we're going to share everything you do with Facebook and Google and Apple and whoever else they want to share with. Because I think you'd have a lot more people who, click that, I don't want to be tracked on this app on their phone if it was laid out a little bit clearer. And I realize they don't want to do that, but that's the thing I hope to see kind of coming out of some of these cases, because there's a lot of privacy cases going on right now globally. But it'll be very interesting to see if it forces that hand just a little bit. I have no faith in that, but I'd love to see.
It's going to be a while, though. It's going to be a while. Like, the internet is still so new, right? And just like everybody just started creating all this stuff with no rules. With no laws, no guidelines. We were just like, this is great. Let's all jump into this and talk to each other all over the world. Let's be free on the internet. And now that things are happening, everybody's like, oh, I didn't sign up for this. Well, you actually did. You just didn't read it,
You did.
And I mean, this is going to continue to happen until more and more cases like Zoom and Facebook and all this stuff actually gets like a serious crackdown. Right? Into the big tech companies actually are held to some kind of law to where they can't do this. And that's a ways out. And,
we can I can talk about this ad nauseum, as many of you know, but this is obviously a deeper subject. And like you said, Zoom's the tip of the iceberg, but this also comes into what we do as audio integrators of what's on cloud versus on premises, and addressing who owns the content and the information. And to quote JOA, AV as a service, this is software as a service and other thing, and conferencing as a service. It has its drawbacks. Plus, I just wanted to name drop Joe Way so I'd get retweeted.
I'm disappointed. I was hoping to get through an episode without talking about Joe Way.
We can have Mitchell edit it out.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Because now he'll hear my disgust over this, and that's worth it.
Okay. Can you feel the love? Once again, my name is Tim Albright. Send your hate mail to Matt Scott. I'm going to throw it to our last question, and I think this is a big one. This is when I get to be news, and it was entirely unexpected. The AVIXA Women's Council is raising money to support young girls in STEM, and this comes from Taylor Moore right here on AVNation. The AVIXA Women's Council is supporting Rosie Riveters, which is an organization that helps young ladies, young girls, find out more about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, since I won't let that go without it. So that is something that AVIXA and Jennifer and Erica of AVIXA's Women Council is working on to support. In the interest of full disclosure, I'll have a little announcement about this right after we get your guys' opinion about this project. So I'll start with you, Alicia, since you brought up the diversity that's happening in AVI-SPL India. I'd like to get your take on this.
I mean, it's a great initiative. We've seen a lot of companies get involved with things like this. I would like to see them catered more directly towards AV, but I think this is a great way to start, right? You already have a group of women or young adults that are already focused and have some interest. So at least capture, or capitalize on that interest and then introduce. So I think this is a great initiative. I think it's a great way for all the councils and us as an industry to get involved and create real change. Instead of saying how do we do this, how do we do this, how do we do this, we could put some dollars behind it. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm excited to support, and I think it's a great story.
Matthew, your take on it? I know it's Rosie the Riveters, a U.S. and English icon, but I'm assuming Canada has something
We speak
similar.
English up here, man. There's one province that doesn't and is snotty about it, but everybody else does.
Yeah.
No, we all know Rosie the Riveter up here. I echo Alicia's point. This is fantastic. I'm always conflicted when I see these. To your point, Alicia, I'd love to see it more focused on our industry because, again, even when you do these events and you focus them on STEM, from an AV directive, it still always goes back to you can be a scientist, you can do all these other engineering things, and it doesn't always come back to AV. But that being said, STEM is such a effective and well-known program. Kind of latching onto that is, in my opinion, the easiest approach right now. It's the lowest bar of entry. I love seeing these things. We have a local STEM program here in my city, and it's amazing to see what they've put out. I love what they're doing, and love the fact that they're serving over 6,000 girls that they've worked with so far, which
Yes.
is just absolutely fantastic because it is. I think this is one of the easiest ways to get people into the channel, is to get them excited about it young. That's how I got into it. I started at 5 or 6. When you start that early and you see how to do it and you see that there's opportunity, it just keeps going. And the way to continue to get that in front of people is through programs like this and to sponsor programs like this, which, speaking of sponsoring, breaking news.
Breaking news. What's that breaking news, Matt?
It seems that this has the initial goal has been met, which doesn't mean that you can't continue to sponsor and get involved, which you should. But there's a wonderful company out of Florida that has jumped up and made a big donation to help kick this off, which is also why you won't see any AVIXA swag on the show floor. Bradford, that is a fantastic donation that you and your company did. Love to see it. So.
Yes, thank you.
Kudos.
Yes,
And
and this
you know
is all
something?
thanks to Megan. Had nothing to do with Tim because I'm so prepped for these shows. I was talking with Megan, who told me about Jennifer and Erica's program. I reached out to them on Wednesday, and on Thursday we had talked, and I fully funded this initiative. So Advisist is the title sponsor for this round. However, the goal is to continue. So there's going to be some silent auctions and other fundraising items. So in doing this, yes, I got rid of swag and a couple other things out of Advisist's budget. But more importantly, I'm helping put my dollars, to Alicia's point, but also through actions of helping things. And I hope everyone else will as well. The goal is to keep this going. There are tons of opportunities to help. I'm lucky to be able to do this, so I'm more than happy to. I've known Jennifer and her family since a while ago. We'll just say that. It might have been before Matt was born. So I'm happy to help that family. This is a great thing. I also highly recommend people get involved in STEM. For those of you who follow me and my small philanthropic efforts, this is my jam, is STEM and science, and especially underrepresented parties, getting them involved, which is one of the reasons I grabbed onto this. And also one of the reasons you don't see me on various things as often is because if it's not a diverse group, I'm tired of talking to old white men all the time. And yes, Matt, you're old.
No, I'm not. I'm not that old. Stop it.
You have 3 kids. I have none. You're old.
It's not.
Alicia, however, is a young spring chicken. She's like 22 or 23.
I wish, but I'll take it.
I'd never bring up age ever.
I didn't.
If I can say one last thing, you always hear people talk about how they can get involved, and they have a hard time seeing how to help with these kinds of things, right? They want to see more people. There's a lot of blowhards on all of our favorite social channels talking about how we need more people in. And yes, you can go to your local high school or your local public school and, work out an arrangement so you can speak to those kids and you can do a presentation on this stuff. But the easiest way to do it is to hook up with companies like this, like Jennifer's, and donate some money. It's super simple. You can feel good about yourself, and you're putting it in the hands of somebody who already knows how to get this stuff accomplished and move the ball forward. It's not that hard. Just get involved.
There's a saying of give people their flowers while you can, right? Bradford deserves all the flowers. This is not the first thing he's done, and you brought that up, Matt, of how do we do this? How do we do this? But Bradford's always just been quiet and done, right? Even the Sound Girls event, he brought a few tickets so people could attend, he's doing the work, and that's what gets me excited, right? Because I'm kind of to the point where it's all right, I'm done having conversation, and then I went back and forth, well, maybe I need to have these conversations so people understand where I'm coming from. And then I was like, no, I'm tired of these conversations, right? But we're going in this roundabout circle, and people like Bradford, he is leading by example, and that is appreciated, And sometimes, I can't cough up all the money to support. I'll give what I can, right? But there's other ways to make small change without money as well. There are people in this industry that don't get any recognition right now. And how do we find them? The same way you find other people in this industry, LinkedIn, Twitter, right? I actively search for people who look different, who talk different, who are in tech roles, who might not be out front customer facing. I take time out, right? That is something that also needs to be done. We need to put time and effort into it. And I had this conversation, we talked about Joe A. I had this conversation with Joe maybe a month ago. How do we break barriers? Why don't we just get to know each other a little better? How about we just reach out across the aisle and legit shake each other's hands, get to know each other better, and then we can figure out how we create that change together.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for the kind words, Alicia. Someone who's finally made me speechless. It's happened. But she's right. first of all, it's not a contest. It's
Right.
not about how much you give. It's kind of like when people were amazed that Jeff Bezos gave $200 million to the Smithsonian. To him, that's not a whole lot of money.
Right.
So it's not about the amount you give. It's about giving. If you give $1, that counts. Don't let anyone tell you it matters how much you give. Yes, I'm very happy I was able to do this. I'm very lucky, very fortunate, worked hard to be able to do this and want to share and make sure other people can do it. But it's not about the amount. It's just about making the change. The other thing is it's not just doing the checkbook, as Alicia said. It's the get involved, get to know people, mentor people, meet with people. I volunteer at a local makerspace working and showing some at-risk youth some of the non-college based opportunities they have in technical fields such as AV. It's mentoring people who I refuse to mentor white men. I know that sounds mean, but all of my mentees in the AV industry have been women over the past 5 years on purpose. And it's just that simple. Reach out, talk to the Diversity Council, talk to Alicia, talk to Frank, talk to Tim, talk to Matt, and there's always those opportunities. Don't think I only can have this small impact. That small impact is kind of the exact opposite of death by paper cuts. If everyone helps a little, everything gets better. If we all, if we all just do a little, it's a whole lot better. I know from talking with some of the charities I work with, they would much rather get $100,001 donations than $100,000 donation, because that means more to them. So don't let the dollar amounts be your tripping point. And it's not about dollars. It's about, to Alicia's point, the actions. It's I'm not going to sit on a panel and talk to old white men. It has to be a diverse group.
I love what you're saying. I love this. But out of all of that, what stuck with me the most is on purpose. Like, you're doing this on purpose. Like, you're making sure that you're legit doing this on purpose, not to be a charity, not to do any of that, but legit on purpose to create change. And that within itself, Bradford, I mean, damn, that's a mic drop, bro. Like, seriously, because that's what it's about. Like, we have to make up our minds to create change on purpose.
So with this monumental event, see that we're about a half an hour, and Tim's going to kill me for going over, but Tim's in Spain, so good luck.
You can blame
so
me, it's fine.
Alicia, how can people find you, get to talk with you, get to know you, hopefully reach out, maybe get a little assistance moving forward? What's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, I mean, my website is definitely the first place, thesmoothfactor.com, or on the internet. I'm pretty much everywhere except TikTok. I still haven't gotten there yet. So, but at The Smooth Factor, and of course on LinkedIn.
And she also has her own podcast. You should definitely give it a listen.
Thanks, Bradford.
Yep. And Matt, besides listening to you on AVWeek right here on AVNation, how can people find you, talk with you, talk about what great things they can do in the industry, etc.?
You can hit me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott. Most of the other social platforms, again, not TikTok. Nice try. You can also hit OmegaAudioVideo.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
And I'm Bradford Ben, sitting in for Tim Albright. Once again, don't follow Tim on the Twitters. All he does is complain about the Bears or the Blues. But I do appreciate you spending time with us today. You can find me at advisus.com. Bradford Ben on almost all the social medias. On LinkedIn, I am not on Meta, which means no Facebook, no Instagram, and I like Tic Tacs, but I don't do TikTok. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a pleasant week and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.